may be to blame.
Plus, President-elect Trump rejecting criticism that his widespread business interest will create a conflict of interest when he takes office. Could it pose an ethics problem for his administration? But first, a message from our service members overseas this holiday season.
Hello, this is Lieutenant Colonel Ruth Ann Crescenzo, and I'd like to wish my family and friends in Saxby, North Carolina, a very happy Thanksgiving. I love and miss you all. Go Canes!
Fox News alert: arson suspected in a rash of fires across Israel. Several Palestinian suspects now in custody as the investigation continues. Firefighters are battling hot, windy conditions to try and beat back those flames, and officials are now appealing to other countries for help. John Huddy's live for us in Jerusalem with more on this. Hi, John.
Yeah, hi, Heather. Greece has sent in aerial support as far as other countries helping out. Greece has sent some planes in to help fight the fires. Turkey, Russia, Italy, Cyprus are also going to be lending a hand, sending planes and other equipment to battle these blazes as well. They've been raging throughout the country at this point. So far, and we'll start in Haifa, which is north of Tel Aviv, Israel's third largest city. Some 60,000 people, according to officials, have been evacuated from homes, from buildings. Some of those buildings, as we've seen in the video, catching fire. There have also been other fires here in Jerusalem, in the areas, the forest areas in and around Jerusalem. Also in Modi'in, that's a city between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And we're getting more information about new fires that have been breaking out, including possibly another one here in Jerusalem as well. And I can tell you, I can actually smell the smoke from our studio here. About 36 people have been injured so far, mostly smoke inhalation, as is often the case. No reports of any fatalities, however, and we don't really have a number as far as the exact size of these fires. We're waiting on that. As far as the cause and arson, you mentioned that, Heather, authorities, including Israel's National Security Agency, Shin Bet, confirmed they're investigating all possible causes, including including arson. Specifically, they're looking at arson as the cause in Haifa of the fires there. And some officials, Israel's education minister, Naftali Bennett, one of them, are even calling the fires terrorism in the form of arson. That is, they are intentionally set by Palestinian suspects, angry about the political situation, that kind of thing. But having said that, security officials maintain if that's the case, they're likely isolated incidents and not necessarily the work of a larger organization such as Hamas, such as Hezbollah. But that said, the spokesman for Israel's police force told Fox News that 4 Palestinians have been detained in Jerusalem, suspected of negligence in the cause of at least one of these fires, and then 4 other Palestinian suspects have been detained in Haifa. They're being questioned possibly in connection with the fires there and possibly in connection with the suspected arson as the cause. But again, it's unclear if these fires were, an act of terrorism. As officials said, they're investigating all possible causes. The concern, though, Heather, at this point is because of the dry, windy conditions, these fires will rage into tomorrow and possibly even the weekend.
Yeah, and as you said, even while they're all in custody or they're all being questioned or held, you said at least one other fire had broken out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. In Jerusalem, that's what we're hearing right now. And like I said, you can even smell that smoke.
All right, John. Be careful, and thank you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Thanks.
President-elect Donald Trump facing some pretty serious questions about potential conflicts of interest related to his huge business empire. Mr. Trump saying legally the president cannot have a conflict of interest because the law carves out an exemption for the president, but that hasn't stopped the critics. Kent Zimmerman is a former corporate general counsel and National Law Journal contributor. Kent, good to see you. Emily Campagno joins us, an attorney as well. Nice to have you here, Emily. And let me begin with you, Emily. If you read the federal statute on conflict of interest, it applies to all public officials except the president and the vice president. So insofar as that conflict of interest statute, Trump's right, isn't he?
Absolutely. Trump is correct here. The typical conflict of interest laws that a normal federal employee would be subjected to, they don't apply to the president and the vice president. And the divestiture of assets that we've seen from prior U.S. incoming presidents, that's been normalized, but it's not legally required. What he is on the hook for, however, is in the United States Constitution, and that is what prohibits his personal gain from foreign government financial benefit.
Yes, the emoluments clause of the Constitution.
Exactly.
And that, I mean, that's a serious problem. Before we get to that, and I'll get back to it in just a moment, Kent, let me get your opinion on this. Look, a federal statute is one thing, but there's a different standard for Congress if they become angry if the president were to personally enrich himself and his organization by using his public office.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Greg. Listen, he may be correct on the technicality that he can't have a conflict and he doesn't need to sell his business holdings. But the reality is he's running some risks. And the big risk here is that he's going to be a less effective president in dealing with Congress, as you foreshadowed in your question. He is going to be perceived as having conflicts. He may be perceived as enriching himself when foreign governments may give him better than fair market deals based on his holdings around the world. He may be perceived as getting kid glove treatment from the U.S. government. Many of his properties deal with the U.S. government. His property, for example, in Washington, D.C. will have to negotiate annually on its rent with the U.S. government. He'll be in a position to appoint the people who will be negotiating with his company and perhaps him. And so that's going to make him look bad and may make him less effective as a president. I think he probably doesn't want that. That's a consideration.
All right. Now, Emily, you've identified the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which basically prohibits him from accepting any compensation from a foreign government. Well, my goodness, he has a lot of foreign businesses, and apparently, we don't really know because he doesn't release his tax returns, apparently some foreign governments are involved with those foreign businesses. So if, as president, his Trump Organization foreign businesses receive compensation from those companies, wouldn't he be violating the Constitution?
Exactly. And that's where a kind of formal separation that he can take to create a chasm between himself and these businesses would render it would be extremely beneficial.
What?
So it's not. Well, like, for example, the people have mentioned a blind trust. The issue with that and with his children being executors is that you have to be independent. So I do believe that a memorandum of understanding.
As well, and then a trustee reinvests those assets, and you're unaware of them. That's what a true blind trust is. So when Trump used the term blind trust, he may have used it incorrectly or not understood it. So you can't really do that. But look, my question, Emily, let me stick with you for a sec. Is he's the owner of the Trump organization, right? So even if he doesn't take any compensation from that organization while president, and they receive foreign government donations, or compensation, I should say, he's still the owner. In a way, he's going to be compensated when he gets his ownership interest after he finishes his presidency. So that's a violation of the Constitution, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what you could argue, and that's why it would be advisable for him to step away, step down, and create that chasm, that formal separation from his businesses. Even with a memorandum of understanding, while sure, it's a piece of paper, it would at least demonstrate that he is refusing to cross that line, to discuss it with any of those employees, and to formally separate. And that would provide, by the way, an additional defense that if he is sued in his capacity as not the president, obviously, but as simply Donald Trump, owner of the Trump empire, then it would enable him to defend that and say, no, I was simply acting in my official capacity, and therefore insulate him in that way, but obviously not from impeachment allegations.
Ken, what about this? I mean, how does he set it up so that he doesn't violate the Constitution, as we've been talking about, and get in trouble?
So, I think the way to really do it is to sell. The challenge, in fairness to him, though, is his assets, these real estate companies, it's very difficult to sell those quickly. We don't have much time left before he takes office, and it could take years, typically, to sell those kinds of assets in a fair way.
So what does he do?
So
he can't do that.
I think, yeah, so because he can't do that, my take is the best option he has is to set up a blind trust run by an independent manager, not his children.
Yeah, but if they don't sell the assets, he still knows what the assets are. He still knows that that foreign business has entanglements with his own businesses, and he may be receiving compensation from a foreign government. So, I mean, he still knows it.
Yeah, the best available option would be to sell, and if he can't do that, independent manager. But I agree with you that he still stands to benefit, including after he leaves office. Now, the benefit, though, to violate the Amendments Clause in the Constitution, he has to have a better than fair market value benefit to be in violation. If it's just a fair market transaction, that's not an issue. So that's an important distinction.
Are we going to see 4 years of members of Congress and other critics of Trump accusing him repeatedly of conflicts of interest and personal enrichment? Both of you, Kent?
Yes, I think it's going to be a mess. I think he's going to be constantly accused by his political adversaries of having conflicts. And I also think he's going to get sued regularly while he's president for acts before he was president.
Because she settled the Trump University case.
Yes.
The bank account's open, everybody. Sue me.
Exactly.
Emily,
the plaintiff's attorneys
fast. Is he going to be mired in this kind of conflict of interest controversy?
I think those are what his critics will try to do, yes. They will try to distract him as much as possible and to create this noise. Exactly, so that this can distract him from actually serving our country.
Emily and Kent, good to see you both. Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Well, they did it during the election, so you would think that it would continue.
Yeah,
111 businesses, 111 in 18 countries. How do you sell all that?
No, you can't sell it all. It would take 8 years. And he's got all of these long-term contracts. You can't get out of those contracts.
And he makes money off his name.
Well, and part of the problem is he criticized Hillary Clinton for her ties to the Clinton Foundation and personal enrichment. And now he's going to be accused of pretty much the same sort of thing.
He's not president yet, though, so we'll see. We'll see what he does about it.
It's going to happen.
Well, it was one of Mr. Trump's top campaign promises. Listen to this.
I'm asking for your vote so we can replace Obamacare and save health care for every family in North Carolina and, frankly, in the United States.
But with millions of users, repealing Obamacare could be a complicated and potentially risky proposition for Republicans. So what changes can we actually expect to the law?
And a deadly construction accident at a power plant, claiming at least 67 lives. What officials suspect happened. President-elect Donald Trump not taking much time off today, taking to Twitter to say this: I am working hard even on Thanksgiving, trying to get Carrier AC Company to stay in the United States. Making progress. We'll know soon. Carrier, of course, made some headlines when the company announced it was shutting down a plant in Indiana, moving it all to Mexico. And that announcement was caught on videotape by workers. Later, it went viral and became a rallying cry for Mr. Trump during the campaign.
One of the promises he's working to keep, another one. Speaking of the president-elect, here's a familiar campaign promise.
Premiums are surging, companies are leaving, insurers are fleeing, doctors are quitting. By the way, doctors, they're leaving, they're quitting. I have a friend who's a doctor. He said, I have more accountants than I have nurses. It's so complicated. And deductibles are going through the roof. I'm asking for your vote so we can repeal and replace Obamacare and save health care for every family in North Carolina.
So now he has changed his tone just a little bit on the future of the health care law, hinting at fixes in some areas rather than a full repeal. So what can we expect next year? Dr. Devi is a clinical associate professor at NYU School of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thanksgiving.
Well, happy Thanksgiving.
So as we talk about Obamacare, we just heard the president-elect talking there, and he says that doctors are quitting. Is that true?
Well, some doctors may be quitting. I mean, I think for doctors, the main issue is probably related to the electronic medical record and some of the costs. So on the surface, an electronic medical record may not sound like a big deal, but I think patients see it a lot, too, where doctors are spending most of their time maybe staring at the computer rather than talking to the patient, or spend a lot of time on the documentation afterwards. All of this stuff tends to affect the patient care, affect sort of the communication between doctors, because those records don't always, facilitate this communication between doctors and the healthcare system.
Yeah,
but more importantly,
I was going to say, with the doctors and the patients, there's also the uncertainty, which makes it hard to plan for the future.
I think that's the biggest issue facing patients, the uncertainty whether you're sick or whether you're healthy, whether you're for the current law or against it. Not knowing what's going to happen in the future can definitely create more anxiety and more stress, right? So there's the uncertainty. There's also a lack of transparency in terms of figuring out which plan to get or what's the best for you, right? Most people need to talk to someone else to try to figure out, well, which plan should I get? And then there's also a fact that you might not know, well, what does your plan cover in the next year, or will your plan still be around? So all of these things can make things harder for patients.
Yeah, but healthy people also impacted. How is that?
Yeah. Well, I think both sick and healthy people are affected by this. Now, healthy people, the issue is that most of the time they will buy plans that have low premiums and high deductibles. But the problem is there are actually two. So first, if they have high deductible plans, then they can get stuck with a lot of the costs for their health care. So even if, let's say, you have some knee pain and you end up getting an MRI, that MRI could cost you about $2,000 and you get stuck with that bill. So first, you might find yourself paying the same medical costs plus a premium, so you might be concerned. And second, in terms of hospitals and healthcare providers, a lot of times they get concerned when costs get passed on to the patients because they're worried about whether they'll actually get paid in the end. So both those things can cause healthcare providers to pull out of these plans and then leave the patients hanging.
Pay more for better outcomes?
Well, that's also another issue. So on the surface, that sounds great, right? If your patient is healthy and you get rewarded for that, that would be ideal. And a lot of advocates of the current law talk about that we should reward people for keeping their patients healthy. But the problem with that type of incentive is that down the road, it creates another unexpected side effect where people might feel like, let me cherry pick the healthy patients. So if I'm a healthcare provider and I get rewarded for having healthy people, let me find the people who are already healthy. And if I get punished for treating the sick people because they're sick, then let me avoid treating sick people. So that's not the intended consequence here, but that's something unintended that might come up down the road. I already have started to see it myself, even practicing in New York.
Well, people, bottom line, they just want to have more control over what they pay.
I think people in general, I mean, Americans and most people want to have control over what they're doing, right? So if you're a healthy person, a non-smoker, working out all the time, you may not want to subsidize somebody who is maybe obese, not working out, smoking, kind of has high-risk habits, right? And it doesn't have to be that extreme. Maybe if you're older, you've had your kids and everything else, you don't necessarily want to subsidize someone who is now, you know, paying for maternity care or newborn ICU or other things that can get expensive. So I think in general, not having control over what you're paying for is really difficult. I mean, some people compare healthcare insurance to, well, auto insurance. Well, we all subsidize each other with auto insurance, right? But there's a couple things that are different there. So with auto insurance, you know, everybody has to have a driver's license and follow certain rules. But healthcare, that's not the case.
No, it sure isn't. Dr. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us. I have to wrap you up, but I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
The battle to liberate Mosul from ISIS control. What's happening on the ground right now and how the terror group is losing ground there. But first, let us not forget the men and women who are protecting us overseas.
Hello, I'm Corporal Jasmine McClendon, a radio operator with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. I want to wish all my friends and family back home in New Orleans, Louisiana, a very happy Thanksgiving from all the Marines and sailors with the 31st MEU. Happy Thanksgiving.
ISIS claiming responsibility for a truck bombing at a gas station south of Baghdad. It killed at least 28 people. Officials believe the intended target was a bus full of Iranian pilgrims returning from celebrating a major Shiite holiday. Well, the attack comes as coalition forces expand their foothold in the ISIS-held city of Mosul. Iraqi soldiers taking back 3 more neighborhoods there with the help of U.S.-led airstrikes. Benjamin Hall is following all of this from London. And Benjamin, what's the latest?
Hi, Greg. Well, we're hearing not only have they taken back these 3 neighborhoods, but also today Shia militias have cut off the main road between Mosul and Syria, meaning that ISIS fighters will now have a lot harder a time resupplying their troops. Nevertheless, inside the city of Mosul itself, the battle continues to rage, and dozens of civilians are being killed every day, including women and children caught up in the middle. Snipers and car bombs continue to be the most deadly weapons used by ISIS. And it's not just civilians. There are also casualties among Iraqi soldiers, though that figure is being closely guarded. We do know they're dying every day, though. Greg?
And what about, Benjamin, the thousands of U.S. soldiers involved in the operation against ISIS this Thanksgiving?
Well, you're right, Greg. It is thousands of them, not least the 5,200 who are aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the Persian Gulf, from which jets are taking off every day as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. The crew there is spending their second Thanksgiving overseas, and today they'll be carving their own roast turkeys aboard the 1,000-foot-long American aircraft carrier. Meanwhile, at Gayara Air Base, just south of Mosul, known affectionately as Q West, U.S. troops also took a pause to remember their families and celebrate Thanksgiving away from home while taking part in the fight against ISIS.
I want to tell my family, to be thankful that all these people are out here and just to be thankful for being alive. That's all.
So, U.S. Marine Joe Hamilton over there, just reminding people that if you look at all the horrors around the world, there is an awful lot to be thankful for back home. And so on this Thanksgiving, back to you, Greg.
Indeed there is, thanks to the men and women in uniform. Thanks, Benjamin Hall.
Well, coming up, a brand new update coming in from the Trump transition team. What the president-elect is doing today as he works through the Thanksgiving holiday.
And a massive security force on duty, keeping New York City safe as we all give thanks for our blessings this holiday. A third hour of America's Newsroom coming up next. Stick around. Fox News alert as we await new action from President-elect Trump. Mr. Trump is celebrating a working Thanksgiving with his family at his Palm Beach estate. Mar-a-Lago. Must be nice.
Looks beautiful there.
Welcome back to a third and final hour inside America's Newsroom. I'm Greg Jarrett.
And I'm Heather Childers. Bill and Martha are off. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
And to everybody out there as well.
Thank you for making us part of it. And there's some new reaction, as we mentioned, coming in to President-elect Trump's recent picks after he tapped South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley as UN ambassador and charter school advocate Betsy DeVos to lead the Department of Education. Garrett Tenney is following all the breaking developments from Washington for us. So, Garrett, what is the latest? It just keeps changing.
It absolutely does, Heather. You know, President-elect Trump can feel pretty good about himself when some of his harshest critics are now praising his decision. And that's what we're seeing with his pick of Betsy DeVos for Secretary of Education. On Twitter, Jeb Bush said she is, quote, an outstanding pick for Secretary of Education. I look forward to her bold leadership at the U.S. Department of Education. And Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse tweeted, the Betsy DeVos nomination is great news for those of us who care about educational reform. DeVos is a former chairwoman of the Michigan Republican Party, but has gained national prominence as a leader in the school reform movement. Her strong support of both charter schools and school vouchers, though, has not made her many friends among Democrats or teachers' unions. And they are already criticizing the pick. In a statement, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi wrote, unfortunately, Betsy DeVos has consistently fought for private school vouchers that do nothing but divert vital funds from public education, our communities, and our children, and those who need these investments the most. Now, if you're looking to unify Republicans, having Nancy Pelosi come out against you certainly goes a long ways to do that.
It certainly does. So could we be hearing an announcement soon about Dr. Ben Carson?
We absolutely could, as soon as tomorrow, in fact. And after turning down a number of cabinet positions, Dr. Ben Carson is now considering if he'll join the Trump administration as the head of Housing and Urban Development. Last night on the Kelly File, Dr. Carson said he is still thinking this decision over.
We did, in fact, have a discussion about things that needed to be done in this country and what the various options were. Whether I could do it from inside the government or outside the government. The offer is on the table, and there are a lot of other possibilities that we're considering. We're considering which is the way that I can be most effective.
And despite the holiday, it appears Mr. Trump is not taking the day off. This past hour, he tweeted, I am working hard, even on Thanksgiving, trying to get Carrier AC Company to stay in the U.S., Indiana. Making progress, we'll know soon. Now, someone who would likely be working with him on that is his Secretary of Commerce, and that's another position we could hear an announcement on very soon. Right now, we're told that billionaire Wilbur Ross is the leading candidate for that job, Heather. Happy Thanksgiving to you, to Greg, everyone at home, and safe travels, of course, to South Carolina.
Thank you very much. And we're working just like the president-elect is. Thank you.
You got it.
Now for more on President-elect Trump's cabinet picks so far and the ones to come, perhaps, let's bring in Kara McKee, Senior Policy Editor at Opportunity Lives. Kara, thanks for being with us. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Let's begin with Betsy DeVos.
Thank you for having me.
And here's the thing. Some people are saying she actually is in favor of Common Core, and to prove it, Jeb Bush tweeted out an endorsement of her as Secretary of Education, and he, of course, fought a rather lonely battle to maintain Common Core. Trump is against Common Core. So how are we to make sense of this? Will that become the issue in her confirmation hearing?
So I think if you listen to the critics, certainly Betsy DeVos has been accused, if you will, of supporting Common Core. But she actually came out in response to this allegation and said, while she's been a part of organizations that have taken a more favorable stance towards Common Core, she doesn't necessarily agree with those positions.
Then why would Jeb Bush say this is a wonderful appointment? See, that's what has people suspicious.
That's a fair question, but if you look at Jeb Bush's record, he's really been an advocate for charter school reform, voucher expansion, and really overhauling the education system in many ways, not just in
So when he endorses her, he's really
place.
talking about vouchers, charter schools, school choice, all of which Donald Trump promised.
definitely, I think that's a broad brush endorsement. I think that's fair.
All right, let me talk about Nikki Haley. Now, people are already saying, well, she has no foreign policy experience. From Trump's point of view, one could argue that those with deep resumes have made a mess of American foreign policy. So let's get some fresh eyes and new blood into the mix, and Nikki Haley satisfies that criteria.
I think that's exactly right. I think if you listen to what the American people, or at least half of them, said in this election, it's that we've seen where supposed book smarts have gotten us, and it's nowhere good. We're ready for people with common sense and street smarts, if you will, in addition to wisdom and leadership potential. So I think President-elect Trump has certainly indicated that he heard that message loud and clear.
Mitt Romney, speaking of foreign policy, is being considered, along with Rudy Giuliani, reportedly, for Secretary of State, neither of which have lengthy, foreign policy resumes, though both are highly respected and considered among Republicans. So what do you make of those possibilities?
One thing that you have to respect about at least the rumors that Mitt Romney and others who have been vocal critics of Trump throughout his campaign are being considered for such an important post is that maybe Trump isn't as motivated by his ego as he's been accused, and in fact is interested in putting in place the smartest and most reasonable people to get things done for Americans across the country. So I think you're right. A resume doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Look, it's no secret that Romney referred to then-candidate Donald Trump as a fraud. Which has prompted Mike Huckabee to say, in order for him to be Secretary of State, he must first repudiate all of his injurious statements toward Trump and apologize. Is that necessary, really? I mean, in politics, your enemies become your friends after the election.
I think President Trump certainly has indicated by talking to Mitt Romney and others, like we just discussed, that he's willing to put the past in the past. I think it is reasonable for him to say, I need to be able to trust my closest advisors, and so wanting to get some sort of public statement that people he's appointing in such important positions are really on his team and aren't going to come out and say anything contrary to the president's agenda that could harm negotiations.
Ben Carson may be the next HUD secretary, Housing Urban Development. Of course, on the campaign trail, he spoke early and often about reinvigorating the inner cities. He is a doctor who brings a great deal of intelligence and compassion to anything that he does. Would that be a good pick?
I think it would be a great pick. I think if you look at the primary responsibilities of HUD, it's overseeing low-income housing and the FHA. That's where most of HUD's budget goes to. And so I think we all saw Ben Carson during the primary campaign as someone who is thoughtful, who's wise, who's compassionate and caring, all the things you just mentioned. And so I think we should take him at his word that he cares very deeply and desires very deeply to go in and change some policies so that we can actually begin to help the people who need it most. We've got long waiting lists in Section 8 housing. We've got just a mess at FHA with financial problems over and again. And so I think putting somebody like Ben Carson in place is a great idea.
Some Democrats have been criticizing the pace and what they call disorganization of this transition. Are you seeing that in truth?
I think all we really need to know is that one of President Obama's former senior aides, David Axelrod, came out recently and said, hey guys, let's think back to 2008. We were moving at perhaps even a slower pace than the Trump transition team now, and I don't remember us being criticized. So I think people are always looking for something to complain about, but in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we have a lot to be thankful for in how Trump has handled the transition so far, both with the pace and the picks.
Karen McKee, thank you for being with us this Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thanks.
Dr. Carson would be in charge of a $32 billion Department of Homeland Security there.
It is big.
Health and
Housing and urban
development. All right, so I was trying to say Homeland Security because of this next story. New York City beefing up security at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade after an ISIS threat to target the holiday event. Rob Schmidt is live for us along the parade route now. Rob, are you noticing a difference in security from previous parades?
Yeah, I've been out here for a few parades, Heather, and I certainly am. We're right here on 6th Avenue. The parade going right by us as we speak. The parade's about half over at this point. It marches right down 6th Avenue towards Macy's in Midtown. And the one thing you're going to notice here, security-wise, is no crosstown traffic. Nothing vehicle-wise can come through this parade. When there's a lull, you used to be able to maybe get a car or two through to get across town. That doesn't happen anymore, and that is simply because of what happened in Nice, France over the summer. You remember the Bastille Day attacks in July, that horrible story where that truck mowed through that crowd, and that is exactly why it's in response to that. And what we have seen are a number of barricades now up, a number of police cars blocking streets so nobody could even get through if they tried. They're also using these trucks, these sanitation trucks that they fill with salt, which creates an extremely heavy barrier that really nothing could get through. And they're placing these strategically all around the city. This is about a 2-mile parade route, so it offers an opportunity for millions of people to watch the parade, but it also becomes a security nightmare that the NYPD has to deal with, keeping all of this area safe. That being said, this all in response to an ISIS article that came out just a couple of weeks ago in a magazine asking people, saying this is a great venue for an attack, asking their followers to do something to the parade, posting a picture of the parade route. That being said, the NYPD and the mayor last night at a press conference said there have been no credible threats at this time to this parade, and so far, so good. Heather.
And this is New York City. NYPD, they know how to deal with large events like this, right?
They certainly do. This is the largest police department in the country, the most well-funded. This is a department that has thousands upon thousands of police officers, and they handle major events all the time. Every year, the United Nations convenes over on the east side. That is a major security operation. World leaders from everywhere, including the president, come into New York. We also had the Pope last year, which was a huge operation. And we just had a couple of weeks ago, both candidates for president watching the election results come in about a mile apart here in Manhattan. They are no stranger to this kind of operation, and they actually spoke last night also about what kind of high-tech stuff they have at the NYPD. Let's listen to that.
We do have the radiation detectors. There'll be another, we'll have a helicopter up in the sky, too. We have a downlink to see what's going on in the parade. So, and again, all of our police officers, each and every one of them are going to have a smartphone. And if there's any issues on the route, we'll be able to connect with the incident command post very quickly and deal with any issue as soon as it comes up.
Yeah, they are well taken care of. There's also been a chopper overhead monitoring everything. So they say that this is a very safe event, and they have a lot of eyes on it and thousands of police officers here. And so far, it has been a lot of fun and really cool to see these floats go by. Heather, back to you.
Definitely reassuring for all those folks out there.
Yeah.
Rob, have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Some breaking news overseas to tell you about. Brand new video coming into Fox News showing a construction accident in China. We're going to have the very late on what's happening there.
Plus, President Obama warning President-elect Trump about the growing threat from North Korea. So what does he have to say to the incoming president on how to handle the volatile region?
And Mr. Trump has not held a news conference since he won the election more than 2 weeks ago. Should he face the journalists? A fair and balanced debate coming up next. Fox News alert, a tragedy overseas. At least 67 people have been killed in eastern China after a scaffolding collapsed at this construction site. It's for a power plant cooling tower. Rescuers now digging through the rubble to search for any survivors there. China has had several safety-related issues at workplaces in recent years, and this appears to be yet another one. Again, 67 people have died when a scaffold collapsed.
It's my prayer that on this Thanksgiving, we begin to heal our divisions and move forward as one country, strengthened by shared purpose and very, very common resolve.
President-elect Donald Trump releasing a video message for Thanksgiving. But the president-elect is catching some flack for not holding a news conference since winning the election. It's a break from tradition that has been going on for decades, apparently. So let's bring in Kristen Hawkins. She is the Director of Students for Life, and Danielle McLaughlin. She's an attorney and political columnist. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Heather.
Happy Thanksgiving. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. So let's start talking about this. I mean, Kristen, I'll begin with you. You know, the people that are giving him flack is the press, which hasn't really helped him out.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is a man who's single-handedly changed the way national political campaigns are run in our country. So why would we expect him to do anything just because it's been done before? You know, for all of the talk of the Obama campaign and their advanced use of technology, you really look at it, it was a 70-year-old man who really went to digital media, went to where the people were online, the entire campaign, and he didn't rely on the traditional media to do that.
Yeah, Danielle, he went against the grain in a lot of areas, and it worked for him in the election, so why not just continue that trend?
I think we will see President-elect Trump continue the trend of reaching out to the electorate directly through social media. YouTube, we see this, his Thanksgiving address. I think, though, more now than ever, the democratic institution of the press is important, and we have to make sure that we don't see any delegitimizing of the press. You know, John Adams, the second president of the United States, said that a free press is essential to the security of the state. And we do, as individuals, need to get unbiased news to the best extent that we can. And these days that means watching Fox and watching MSNBC and consuming news from a wide variety of sources. But when it comes directly from the horse's mouth, then we have to make sure that we can verify, that we can research, and that the American people get the knowledge that they need, because knowledge is power, to make sure that they, you know, they know what's going on.
So YouTube videos, he put one out talking about his first 100 days and what he hopes to accomplish, put another one out yesterday, his Thanksgiving, what he had to say about Thanksgiving to everyone, calling for unity. When you see him there on YouTube, there's not an opportunity for journalists to get involved and maybe not to say everything he said, the way he said it, put words in his mouth. So, you know, when you talk about trusting what he said, that would be the best way to do it.
Yeah, and that's when we look at the polls coming from this past election. Americans simply don't trust traditional media. A Media Research Council poll came out, said that 8 in 10 Americans didn't think that they were getting unbiased news. 7 in 10 thought that the media were in for a particular candidate. 2/3 of them thinking the media was favoring Hillary Clinton. So no wonder why we're going and we're relying on digital media to go right to the horse's mouth, to hear from our candidates, hear from our elected officials, and hear what they have to say, and then we'll research it on our own.
Yeah, Danielle, but at the same time, if you ask people, the majority of people say, specifically with Twitter, that the president-elect should maybe stop.
Well, I think what you're seeing in Twitter is really a genuine side of President-elect Trump. He doesn't like to be criticized, and he will certainly let you know what he thinks. As it relates to Mr. Trump, he is a pretty special character in the sense that he showed through the extent of the campaign trail that he was willing to, shall we say, be a little bit loose with the truth. And I'll give you one example. He talked about President Obama and the way that the president dealt with a protester at a rally. He said that the president was rude, and that no video cameras or no television cameras actually showed the protester. And that was proven by news reporting of that event to be demonstrably untrue. So I think that we need a mix. We need social media and we need traditional media, but I think they can work in conjunction. What matters the most is the people, is all of us, that we know what's going on, that we get clarity and transparency.
But do you think it's fair that, you know, as we said, he's getting flack for this, not giving this news conference since he was elected, but he's been doing a lot of work, all right? He's working today, as we know from his post on Twitter. And did the same amount of pushback happen during the election when it came to Hillary Clinton, who really cut off the press? She did not give news conferences. So are they both being treated the same way?
I think they are, and I will say the Washington Post is saying that Donald Trump hasn't given a real press conference in actually 120 days, which is since the third day of the DNC. So there's a little bit of a difference in, I guess, treating the way that he's outreaching to the press. And let's remember that he eviscerated Hillary Clinton for not giving these presses. So we need to hold him to the same standard, and we should expect the same thing from him.
Okay. All right. Thank you both for joining us. I hope that you have a great Thanksgiving.
The same to you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
The number of police officers killed by gunfire skyrocketing this year, the latest just last weekend in the state of Texas. So what can the president-elect do about the targeting of our police officers? That story coming up. Plus, a new push for a recount in some key swing states that Hillary Clinton narrowly lost to Trump. A female candidate is behind that effort, but it's not who you think.
A manhunt underway for a suspect that police say shot and killed a security guard at a restaurant in York County, Virginia. Officials say that the guard was escorting 26-year-old Colston Ryan Lewis from an event at the parking lot of the restaurant when Lewis shot him. Authorities have identified the guard as 42-year-old Richard Irvin, and police say that drivers should avoid the area.
President-elect Trump campaigned on a law and order theme, and when it comes to protecting police officers, he's certainly got his work cut out for him, because so far this year, 59 officers, well, that number says 57, have been killed by gunfire, a dramatic 74% increase over last year. Caroline Shively is live in Washington with more on this. And Caroline, it's such an incredibly high number. I guess the numbers tell the story.
They absolutely do, Greg. And think about this. There have been 20 ambush killings of police officers this year. That's the most since 1995. According to the Officer Down Memorial page, 131 police officers have died in the line of duty this year. That's up 13% compared to 2015. But the gunfire death statistic you mentioned is the greatest jump. The 59th officer to die in a shooting this year is Colin Rose. He died last night in Detroit. Rose was a Wayne State University police officer. Witnesses say he was trying to handcuff a suspect on theft charges when the man pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. Rose fell, and witnesses say the suspect shot him 2 more times. 40 emergency vehicles held a silent processional around the hospital last night after Rose succumbed to his injuries 24 hours after the shooting. A man has been arrested in that case who had previously served time for assaulting a police officer. Greg.
Caroline, police want a change at a national level. What exactly are they asking for?
Well, the International Association of Chiefs of Police is now setting up a task force for violence against police officers, but they're also asking for help from the new administration.
We're hoping that a real good look by the President-elect and his team by putting together a National Criminal Justice Commission might be one of the answers we need to look at a holistic approach for once.
Chief DeLucas says the last time a commission like this was set up was in 1965. He says the time has come so they can act and move forward. Greg?
That is just way too many deaths of police officers. Caroline Shively. Caroline, thank you.
You bet.
Well, word that President Obama warned the president-elect about North Korea, saying that the nuclear threat from that rogue nation should be a top national security priority. So how should Mr. Trump handle it? Plus, we all know the results from Election Day, for the electoral vote. But while Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, now there's a new development regarding 3 key swing states, right?
That's right, with Green Party candidate Jill Stein behind it. What she just raised millions of dollars to do.
It's unusual in such a short period of time in this young century. We've already had 2 elections where the loser got more votes than the winner. So I think it's something we should look at.
Specialist Bushy here with the 101st Airborne in Iraq. I want to wish my mom happy Thanksgiving. I love you.
back to America's Newsroom. A new push for a recount in the presidential election, and it's coming from Green Party candidate Jill Stein, who just raised millions of dollars for the effort that focuses on recounts in 3 key swing states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Rich Edson is live for us in Washington with more on this. So, Rich, what is behind this effort?
Good morning, Heather. And the Stein campaign says it is to restore confidence in our voting system. Stein's campaign claims this effort is, quote, not intended to help Hillary Clinton, though delivering those 3 states to Clinton would change the outcome of the election. And in each of those states, several thousand votes could flip the results. In a statement, Green Party candidate Jill Stein writes, quote, after a divisive and painful presidential race, reported hacks into voter and party databases and individual email accounts are causing many Americans to wonder if our election results are reliable. These concerns need to be investigated before the 2016 presidential election is certified. We deserve elections we can trust. The campaign notes the deadline to file a request for a Wisconsin recount is tomorrow. Michigan and Pennsylvania's deadlines are next week. It says it has raised enough money, more than $3 million, to file the recount requests, though the Stein campaign adds attorney's fees could raise the cost to between $6 and $7 million. Clinton nor her aides have offered any public comment on this effort, Heather.
So is there any specific evidence of cyber interference?
No, though a group of computer scientists says it is possible for a hacker to have influenced the outcome of the election. And given the cyber theft and emails and internal documents from Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and the Democratic National Committee, these scientists say it is worth investigating. Computer science professor J. Alex Halderman of the University of Michigan writes in a Medium post, quote, America's voting machines have serious cybersecurity problems. The only way to know whether a cyber attack changed the result is to closely examine the available physical evidence, paper ballots and voting equipment in critical states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Though he adds the reason for the unexpected results in those states is likely incorrect polling instead of a hacked election. Heather?
No, there were no incorrect polls this time around. I don't recall one that was incorrect.
Very
all right.
true.
Thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You as well.
Now to President Obama's foreign policy advice for his successor, with word that Mr. Obama has warned President-elect Trump about the nuclear threat from North Korea, saying it should be a top national security priority. Joining us now to talk about that, Peter Brooks, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Peter, always great to have you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Good. Same to you.
All right, so
good
look,
to be here.
North Korea has successfully tested nuclear weapons. They're believed to have anywhere from 20 to 40 of them. They have a delivery system. The only question is, can they miniaturize a nuclear weapon atop a ballistic missile that could eventually reach mainland U.S.? So does that make North Korea the #1 national security priority for President Trump?
Well, that's interesting, you know, that they said that this was I can understand why President Obama would say this is a critical, a very important national security threat. But considering ISIS and the challenges of terrorism, you know, I don't know exactly where he'd rank it. It would certainly be in the top 5 in my view. But you're right, Greg. There are a lot of things to be concerned about. Two of the things you did mention is that North Korea is now developing a submarine-launched ballistic missile and also making their intercontinental ballistic missiles mobile, which makes them much more difficult to attack or defend against. But yes, the Obama administration's policy towards North Korea has been one of what they call strategic patience. We've made no progress. There have been 4 nuclear tests during President Obama's tenure out of the total of 5. And I think we're probably going to see another one perhaps early in the Trump administration. But yeah, there are real challenges. It's very unpredictable. North Korea is a wild card, and they do have a tendency to be provocative, and they may decide to test the new administration early in its term next year.
Well, I mean, Peter, to that end, I mean, you could almost set your watch by the provocative actions of, nuclear testing by North Korea always seems to happen during a U.S. political transition, right? So it's going to happen.
Well, Well, we had one in September. That was the most recent one.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we did see one early on. We have to be ready for this. I mean, and the important things here are to think about our policy as we go forward towards North Korea. I mean, we should have a strong declaratory policy that, you know, and telling people that our alliances with Japan and South Korea are strong. We need to have a strong conventional posture.
Right.
And one of the things I don't think we've done enough about, Greg, in recent years, especially during the Obama administration, is missile defense. Having that defense against these various types of missiles. Yes, exactly.
And
the missile shield.
Is that workable? Is it operable?
Well, we have one. We have a rudimentary one in the Pacific with sites in California and Alaska, but we need more. We have some sea-based elements as well, but I think we need to refocus on this because of the growing threat from North Korea. I think everybody is surprised at how far North Korea has gone. They have short-range missiles, intermediate-range ballistic missiles that can now reach potentially with a nuclear weapon Guam, and of course the concern about the continental United States.
The only country that really has any influence over North Korea's behavior is China, and they have been consistently reluctant to exercise that power and influence. Can Trump force the Chinese? I mean, he has said during the campaign that he'll label them a currency manipulator, hit them with heavy tariffs. Might that get their attention and cause China to put the firm fist on North Korea to knock it off?
Remember, China has different interests on the Korean Peninsula than we do. They like the buffer state of North Korea. They're worried about chaos in North Korea, loose nukes, massive refugee flows. So they're only willing to go so far in putting pressure on this regime that they do have, you know, an alliance with, an agreement with, a treaty with. They have been close. They fought together against us during the Korean War. Now, the other thing is I think that people overlook looking at the United States and others do have opportunities to make it much more difficult for North Korea instead of operating through Beijing. It would be great, Greg, if Beijing would do this, but they've not done enough. Going after North Korean banking is critical, and the Bush administration did it to some effect, and it made North Korea come to the negotiating table. So international banking, North Korea doesn't do much on the international stage in terms of trade, but they do some, and that's one way to get at them.
Well, but I wonder whether cutting off North Korean banks' contacts with other nations would do any good. Aren't they already pretty much isolated in the world?
Not as much as you think. Remember, the way that they keep control in North Korea is that Kim Jong-un, the leader, basically takes care of the elite. The military, the intelligence services, the party. If you cut them off where they can't get their luxury goods, they can't travel, these sort of things, you could put a lot more pressure on them. Of course, there's going to be leakage. You know, they can work through China and other places. But during the Bush administration, they went after a bank in Macau, and North Korea came to the nuclear negotiating table because of their inability to get some things. They do need to get some things from outside of North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, historically, at least in the last 20 years, the only time we've ever gotten China to do anything was during the Bush administration when we went after those banks, and suddenly China had the capacity to capitulate. But let me ask you about the military option, because, you know, prior presidents have always said that is still on the table, always on the table. You never rule it out. But that would certainly, if exercised, create a security crisis in the region, would it not?
Yeah. Absolutely. You have to remember, just pull out a map is the first thing I always do when there's a crisis. The capital of Seoul, which is a large metropolitan area of probably 10 million people, is only 25 miles. The South Korean capital is only 25 miles from the demilitarized zone, which is a total misnomer. It's one of the most militarized zones in the world. Right. Lines of demarcation. North Korea not only has nuclear weapons, they have chemical weapons, they probably have biological weapons, they have a large artillery force that could rain all sorts of weapons down on Seoul in short order. You know, we have 28 to 30,000 brave Americans there right now working with 650,000 South Koreans to keep the peace. But that could change very, very quickly. Ultimately, if there's a war, it would be very ugly. It would be devastating. Right. We would prevail, but the problem is what happens before we do prevail over the North Korean regime. And then what does China do? Sure. What would China do? The same thing like they did in 1950 and come to the aid of their North Korean allies.
The Korean War. We know how that worked out. Peter Brooks. Peter, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Okay. Same to you, sir.
Well, back at home, no major weather troubles for most of the country this Thanksgiving. That's good news, although there could be some snow in the northeast and a storm in the northwest. But earlier, Los Angeles, look at this, a traffic nightmare.
Yikes.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone was on the road.
That's the 405.
Yep. And
I've logged a lot of hours turned into days on that freeway.
Looks like a river of cars. This is, of course, the 405. And if you think starting out earlier maybe would have helped, think again. Look at that. This is the view Tuesday
That's
night.
worse. That's not moving.
Yeah, no. AAA warned that nearly 50 million people would be hitting the road this year, and we sure hope that everyone is getting to their holiday dinners on time. That picture right there, though, it was put on Twitter, and they were doing hashtag mannequin challenge to that because no one's moving. Get it?
Nobody, I got it.
Yeah.
That's very good. My daughter saw that, and she said, when are they going to create these aerial cars? And I said, well, what do you do about highways and stuff? She said, a virtual highway. There you go.
But then you just have the problem up in the air. Yeah.
Literally. All right. Helping to feed the needy, how one Chicago restaurant is spreading that message this Thanksgiving.
Plus, your favorite pooch may be more like you than you think. New research with some surprising insight into your dog's memory.
She broke a needle and she can't so walking a dog. Just a walking bird dog. If you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to.
Donald Trump's most prized possessions, the treasured items that matter to him most, and the stories behind them. It's a rare glimpse into his personal life. Don't miss his Harvey Levin hosts Objectify Donald Trump this Thanksgiving on Fox News Channel.
I love my dog as much as I love you. But you make a fade, my dog will
always come through.
Aww. Well, we all know that dogs are smart,
We do
right?
indeed.
But it turns out that man's best friend also has a pretty good memory. And a new study, researchers say that dogs, like humans, appear to have memories linked to specific times and places.
Yeah, sort of Pavlovian, if you will. Let's bring in Dr. Kelly Powers, a surgeon at Stanford Hospital. Good to see you, thanks. What do you make of this?
Well, great to be here. Happy Thanksgiving, you guys.
You too.
I have to say, this is a little bit of a different shift of what I'm usually reporting at here at Fox News, but today we're talking about dogs.
Yeah.
And as a dog owner, I have to say I took interest in this study. So are dogs smarter than we think? According to a new study, they say yes. They actually can recall memory based on events and experiences, which is different than the former, what we thought before. So a new study out of Current Biology looked at, and it's a small one, it looked at 17 dogs. They conducted 35 trials. And out of the 35 trials, these dogs were able to recall experiences successfully 33 out of 35 times.
So meaning that they're not just copying what their owners are doing, like if the owner says, you know, fetch, they're actually going away.
Yeah,
and then coming back.
So what's so interesting about this is actually a paradigm shift. So the old school of thought is that you train a dog based on repetition and reward. So you're like, you tell your dog, sit down, here's a treat, you're going to get this treat, and then they know. Exactly, and then they know from the bell, exactly, that there's some kind of survival here, based on survival. So they're getting food, or they know where to go to get their water, they know where to go to sleep. This study changes things. It's looking at more self-awareness. So they're aware of where they are, kind of not based on survival.
Of course, I knew this all along because as a kid growing up, I watched Lassie and Rin Tin Tin, and those were really smart dogs.
Yes, yes. I have to say.
Rin Tin Tin.
Yeah, it's long before your time.
I don't know if my dogs can actually do this. To be honest, these dogs are really pretty talented, I have to say.
But they could go away. That's the other thing. They go